Welcome everybody for listening or watching our new postcard episode of the Ocular Insider, the podcast about the dry eye and more. And as you know, last year we started with a nice series of introduction of the um, very interesting and motivating eye surgeons, doctors, passionating for ocular surface health. And I have this privilege today here in India, in Jaipur, during the IOC Congress 2026, having a special guest from Pune, Dr. Natasha Pahuja. She's an Indian respected ophthalmologist, cornea and refractive surgeon, and scientist. She's currently managing director of Natasha Eye Care Research Center in Pune, in the state of Maharashtra,
Correct.
in India. She's in specialist in cornea refractive surgery, LASIK, dry eye. She has a lot of year experiences in this field, and she did a fellowships and master university degree in UK,
In Maastricht, in the Netherlands.
in Netherlands, and you've been in fellowships of the respected Indian doctor Narayana Netherlaya, and you got a British contact lens association that you are also in optometry.
That's my sister.
Oh, it's your sister. It's you see the AI mixing everything, but give you more awards.
Yes.
But definitely, we are very pleased to have you this today to hear and
I am pleased
be
to be
part of
here.
our new podcast episode. So welcome, Natasha. May I call you Natasha?
Please
You
do.
allowed me.
Please
So,
do. Yes.
so I'm so happy. So my name is Peter Baranovic, and I will be try to introduce you this interesting person from India. I've been having a chance to see your presentation yesterday during your dry eye session. So, Natasha, tell us, who is Natasha Pahuja?
Okay. Thank you, first of all, for that very kind introduction. And I can't say how pleased I am to be here because, Peter, you have been very welcoming. And I learned so much from you yesterday. So
Thank you.
thank you for the conversations and interactions. Yeah. Um, Coming back to the question, who is Natasha? I think she's this um, girl who likes to dance, who is very, very passionate about caring. So, they say an essence of a human being. For me, that would be as much joy as I can bring to other people.
Mhm.
And be it through conversations or through seeing patients,
Yes.
healing them. I tell this to my staff that when a patient comes here, they are already ailing. The best thing that you can do is make sure that they'll dump all their problems here and go back home. So this place is very sacred for us. Our hospital is very sacred for us. It's a place where people can dump their problems and go. So yeah, and I think that's what we're working towards. It's just not surgeries and calculating ROIs.
Yeah.
It's something more than that.
I'm. I also know that you are a mother of the nice 4 years girl.
Yes, I will.
Will she follow in your steps?
Oh, that's her choice. It's actually absolutely her choice because uh, she, although does come to the hospital even now, and she knows how to use a slit lamp. She knows how to go, and so we have this tag. It's called the dry eye expert. It's a magnetic clip. She likes to wear it and walk around in the hospital. And her job, as soon as she comes to the hospital, is helping patients. She just gives sanitizer to all the patients, and she tells them that if you use this, you will not transmit infection to others. So keep using it. So yeah, she's got these small roles in the hospital. She contributes in her way. Yes.
I really enjoy your small way of education, being mother, teacher, guider through to our, let's say, the time of life. So, what brings you to the ophthalmology? It was something that fascinates you to stay in being ophthalmologist.
Okay. So I think it was passively programmed into my system.
Okay.
My father is an ophthalmologist, and when I was in school, I used to do my homework in the OT. When my father was operating, I used to see his surgeries going on, and I used to sit and do my homework. Um, so as I said, I was passively programmed. What got me into cornea was when I was doing my residency. I s- I had gone to a remote village in India, and a very old lady was. So we used to do these free eye camps, right? A very old lady was sitting outside a school where the eye camp was happening, and she said that our camp started at 10 a.m. It finished at 4 p.m. and she was outside for all those hours. And I was walking out and I saw her and I was like, "Why are you still here?" So she said, uh, "Doctor Beta," in Hindi, in our local language, she said, "I don't have 5 rupees to pay for your eye checkup,
Oh,
but I have problem in my eye. And I don't think I can pull for another 15 days till you come next. So I could you just look at my eyes? I promise you I'll pay you 5 rupees the next time you come." And that touched me. And she actually had a fungal corneal ulcer.
oh,
And so then I realized that there is so much that's happening in the world, and we are sitting in our beautiful cocoons, that we are not putting ourselves out there when we have the luxury and the agency to do it for other people. I think we should, and that's the reason why I was that one incident got me attracted to cornea, and that's why I'm a cornea refractive surgeon.
that's I have a. This is one of the thing I have a full respect for the people who are a doctor, and you have my full respect.
Thank you.
I love this what you just said. It's amazing. It is inspiring others, sharing your joy, sharing the care. This is something that it's a positive feeling that you're
Yeah,
getting, and
yeah.
I also feel it even be staying in all the time on the other side.
Yes.
I'm if I know that I'm part of the good things that make us much more, in humanity, much
Yeah.
more feeling great. So,
Yeah.
so, um, so Natasha, what is your setup of your eye clinic in Pune? Is it? I know that you do a lot of things, but so having large team, as I already heard, must be challenging. Or do you have some advices how those things go well? Or I know that starting was I think with one of the biggest journey and that you made it. Was the choice the first
So,
place?
well, quite honestly, my father and mother were the people who started the hospital. I was just put in that position, and so yeah, yeah, you're like,
Dive in.
here you go. This is all you now. Yeah, but so this is what I keep telling my mentor as well. That we have been trained to perform very good DALCs and DMEGs and corneal surgeries and refractive surgeries, but nobody teaches you in your fellowship or during your residency how to run a hospital. How if my receptionist is not feeling up to it for
Yes.
working on that day, what do you do?
Yes, that's
So this is something that the law that knowledge or the training is lacking.
okay.
And I think there should be a separate short MBA course, because we have studied for 15 years already. Yeah, there should be a short course for people who know what they want to do. For instance, there should be a course which tells you, if you want to get into private practice, this is what these are the things that you need to know. If you want to go and work somewhere, this is the
Mhm.
profile that you need to build. These things need to be taught. Is a
Um,
formal training should happen.
I'm sure there's already those programs are running. Even the post education, I know that it's right now. I saw it in States already 10 years ago. Even during the interesting conferences, there was a side by side program just for the managers. You know how to do this. Even right now in Europe, there is a nice conference. It's called the Ophthalmopreneurs, and it's about how they run the successful eye clinic,
Yes.
and the sharing between the managers, doctors. So it's not only this side of the cake, but also these personal experiences, how to not do the same mistakes. But
Yeah.
we are human.
Yeah.
we want to do it, our mistakes.
Yeah, no, but what I mean is that, there should be a subject in residency
Yeah.
or fellowship. Just
Exactly.
introduce.
Yeah.
There should be some awareness when you are getting trained. Because,
I'm sure that's the point.
Yeah.
That could be, hope that those who are listening carefully, this could be a new educational part.
yes, just one
So-
subject.
So as you mentioned, that go through these all this, surgeries aspects, and coming up to the starting point of our vision and ocular surface. So how you see now, or right now, all the compliances that we have, the different surgeries and effects of the vision, and finally we want to have a happy patient. How you see personally, and I see yesterday your presentation, which was awesome. Honestly, congratulations.
Thank you.
And I hope that you would be able to share this knowledge with others more and more. So how you can, if you can summarize it a little bit, how you would say what are the important parts of a successful refractive surgery, and is not only to make a good cut and to measure. So what are your suggestions?
That's a great question, actually. So, what we forget as corneal surgeons or retinal surgeons or cataract surgeons is that the first refracting surface of the ocular surface is the tear film. And I don't think we give it enough importance in how, when we plan a surgery, for instance, or we measure the outcome of a surgery, we do not actually ever focus on the tear film at all. So, for instance, if I am doing a cataract planning, the first thing I'll do is a keratometry without actually thinking that is the keratometry getting impacted because of the tear film or not.
Yes.
And most surgeons don't do the keratometry themselves, right? They have technicians and optometrists who do it for them. And if they're not well trained enough, they don't know that there is a variation, there's a standard deviation that is happening in the keratometry of the same eye of the same patient, only because of the way their tear film is behaving. And most often than not, we force the patients, oh, don't blink, I'm taking a scan, don't blink, I'm taking. They don't understand that that is going to actually alter the scan. And that is so important. They don't tell them that, you blink in between, I will tell you when I'm going to start the scan. These are small things that should be incorporated into the practice, because you are, again, not looking at the tear film at all. And then you keep blaming, oh, I put a trifocal, I put an EDOF, even a toric monofocal,
Yeah,
and the patient is not seeing well. Well, the problem was the preoperative scan was not okay, but you're making it worse by not taking care of it post-operatively as well, where you're actually focusing of, oh, maybe the centration is not right, or maybe there's a lens tilt, or there is a rotation of IOL. People call it, it is probably happening because of negative dysphotopsias and whatnot.
Neural
Well,
adaptation.
Neural adaptation, that's what we're talking about. And the golden word, it's like a blanket treatment for everybody. Oh, it's going to take some time for your neural adaptation to happen and all that. It does not make sense. A patient will not lie. If a patient is coming to you with a symptom, it's our job, our responsibility to figure out where it's coming from. And if you think it is not happening because of the lens, don't put it on neural adaptation. Try and figure out where it's coming from, And the first, as I said, the first and foremost is a very good history taking. If a patient says that, I can see better during the day, but it gets a little hazy in between blinks, or I get tired by the end of the day. If these symptoms come up, there is something which is transiently going wrong. If it's with the lens should be persistent. It's just in the history, it's just about listening. And I think if that conversations happen, you will definitely try and, instead of just nudging the problem off and putting it on other things,
Yeah.
I
Maybe
think,
resending patients to
Yeah.
the next stage.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not- I do not mind.
but I think it's okay to be honest and say, I don't know where it's coming from, but you are symptomatic. Let's try and figure it out.
So what should be then the proper steps to have this excellent outcome? And what do you do when you see there is a steps that needs to be done before or after?
I think the first and foremost, we are clinicians. Um, the first thing that should be done is a good clinical examination. Even when the patient is sitting in front of you, for instance, if I'm planning a refractive surgery and a female sits in front of me and has got a lot of acne, I would definitely evaluate her tear film and I will explain it to her that why do I want an extra test. So most often than not, I tell the patients that you see you've got acne, your skin glands are sebaceous glands. Your meibomian glands are modified sebaceous glands, and they get continued over the eyes. Your skin is continuing all over. These modified sebaceous glands have the same tendency of what your skin glands do.
Yes.
So if somebody's sitting in front of me with a lot of acne without even putting a slit lamp on, the first thing I would say is that, let's do a tear film check.
You may have also taken medication.
Like
That's,
isotretinoin.
that's definitely affecting the meibomian glands function.
Yes.
You can already see these links, connecting what you need to search.
Yes, absolutely. And the moment you shine a slit lamp on, and if they're very symptomatic, they have too much photophobia, you know that this patient is not going to be very happy, because if they can't tolerate the light of a slit lamp, it means there's something happening on the ocular surface. Why are they not comfortable with light? When they are well informed that you're going to have some light on the eye, and then they start doing this and they put their chin back, head back. So these are small symptoms that need to be addressed. And the simplest thing that I do is I call it the Paracane test.
Mm-hmm.
So I put a drop of Paracane. And when they come to me with symptoms of, say, it's pricking, it's burning, I'm not comfortable, my eyes feel tired. After the entire tear film or the ocular surface check, I put a drop of Paracane. And I ask them, are you feeling better?
Mm-hmm.
And if they feel better, that means the problem is in the nerves.
Yes.
Yeah. So that means, in general, the peripheral nervous system is so activated that even the smallest stimuli, for instance, loud sound, sitting in front of the AC, the smallest stimuli of the mechanoreceptors, the thermoreceptors, the chemoreceptors on the ocular surface, they get activated. Now, in this case, you would want to try and figure out which of the symptom is making it worse, and you would want to try it. The Paracane test is the simplest, or the Proparacaine, the anesthetic test is the simplest test. If the symptoms go away, it is neuropathic. If the symptoms don't go away, that means it's there something from the ocular surface itself.
So, your presentation yesterday was touching the effects of the dry eye and during the surgeries, preparation, after outcome. And I know that you are a long-time user of our technology, of IRPL. Is it something that you may highlight beneficial in your practice?
So, what I like about IRPL is there are three things. One, it's very quick. Two, you see immediate effect.
Mm-hmm.
And three, it lasts very long. So IRPL is not my primary treatment. It is an adjuvant treatment. It's like so if I'm doing
a step-by-step, adding one is needed.
Well, so if I know a patient has preoperative dryness of the eyes, I've evaluated, I can't wait for the surgery. I would do the surgery, or probably I'll do first sitting before the surgery and then do the subsequent ones after.
Mm-hmm.
And they know that it's basically to enhance the outcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
And increase the neurological connection.
Precisely. If I know for a fact that my patient has been on anti-glaucoma medications for far too long, and they're getting intolerant, you see the congestion, you see the ocular surface is not looking very happy, in those cases, I would immediately go ahead and tell them that I can't stop these eye drops. If you're not ready to undergo surgery, I think the best that we can do is you can prime the ocular surface so that we can continue these eye drops for a very long time. And that's the time I would indicate an IRPL treatment. And they do really well. Believe me, they do really well.
You mentioned yesterday Calazion. I know that we also promoting as a new additional optional treatment. What are your experiences?
So, if a patient comes to me just for the first time and they have a chalazion, the first thing I would do is ask them if they've been rubbing their eyes or,
Or the hygiene
just first,
is
yeah. The first, it's just a first incident. If they've never had it before, I would just conservatively treat it. But if a patient comes to me for the second time, I would definitely, in addition to our lid hygiene issues, telling them not to put eye makeup if it's a female, or for that matter, even males these days.
yes, but nowadays it doesn't know.
Yeah, but yeah, well,
It's very modern.
yeah, it is. It is. I mean, I am all pro for this. There's no gender fluidity, gender equality, all of it is absolutely fine. But what I mean to say is that there should be awareness that this is your root cause
Yes.
and either change it.
Yes.
These are modifiable factors. I'm not saying it's your genetics.
Yes.
You're not born with it.
Definitely.
Yeah, but this is something that you can change. And I think with right counseling and right awareness, people do want to take care of their eyes,
So the treatment with the EI is successful for you?
Oh, yes, 100%. So I have as I was telling you yesterday, I have about 18 patients now who have more than 2 chalasia in a gap of 6 months. I just directly tell them, stop doing everything, use lid wipes, and do these 3 sittings of IRPL. My own cousin, he had, in fact, the day we installed the device, I asked him to come as a guinea pig. And I did IRPL. He used to come to me every 3 months with a new chalazion. And it's been almost 8 years now that he's not had a single chalasia just after 3 sittings. I didn't have to do a booster
That's
shot.
great to hear that you also not having this recurrency.
Yeah.
Coming back, probably because of the, healing whole area with the red light biomodulation, decreasing the infections and inflammation.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's amazing. The other part we were discussing yesterday, I saw your presentation, was glaucoma. And I know that we've been talking about the beauty effects of the using the glaucoma eye drops for extending the lashes. So and the topic you touched was very, very interesting. I would be happy if you share with audience what may cause as a problem and how it can be linked to the dry eye.
Yeah. So what happens is people want longer eyelashes, right? Be it men or women. What is happening these days is that women who use mascaras, most mascaras have got prostaglandin analogs. So the same prostaglandin analogs that are used in anti-glaucoma medications. So basically, it was a side effect of the drug. When PG analogs had started, it was a side effect of the drug where they had longer eyelashes. And eventually, they started incorporating it into mascara. So mascaras have got prostaglandins. That itself causes so much inflammation on the ocular surface. And in addition to that, now people have started doing eyelash extensions. So the glue itself causes squamous blepharitis. And the glue is so heavy, clogs up the meibomian gland orifices. You can't clean, even with lid wipes, you can't clean them because they are like a physical barrier, an obstruction that's there. And it causes falling of eyelashes. It's absolutely not healthy for the ocular surface at all. So I would recommend, if you have to, probably just clean your eyelashes with a simple baby oil instead of using all these commercially available products, because they'll be more suitable for the eye.
Regarding this, also the using of the glaucoma eye drops and link and that the glaucoma is basically helping and increasing the risk of the dry eye. Did you have already tried combination with the IRPL technology decrease these symptoms?
Oh yes, 100%. Well, in all honesty, about 80% of patients do get comfortable after the second sitting.
Oh, great.
They get more tolerant
Okay.
to the anti-glaucoma medications. But I also ask them to clean their eyelashes with tea tree oil wipes. Yeah, it balances the pH. And these days we are very fortunate because there are so many preservative-free anti-glaucoma medications also that are coming in. So it's relatively healthy for the ocular surface. But patients who have been on AGMs for more than 2 years, I immediately ask them to start with do one sitting of IRPL, followed with booster shots every 6 months. And I'm seeing my father's patients who are been on AGMs for 20 years, who had stopped. The compliance had reduced only because of the ocular surface issues. But after the sitting of IRPLs, they've been very, very comfortable. They're back on their AGMs.
That's great, and I'm so thankful to have you today here because I know that you need to run for next meetings.
Yes.
It's been so big pleasure, and I already have a lot of more questions, and I hope that we could meet again and make maybe more episodes with you. It's such a big pleasure to meet a person who has the deep knowledge and also the personal experiences and to share with the audience. And I'm happy to find and meet you, Natasha. So thank you so much. It's
Such a
such an
pleasure.
honor. And hope that you enjoyed this friendly talk.
Oh yes, absolutely. It was
And
fun.
no stress, no
Yeah,
preparation. And I also hope that you enjoy to listen and watching, and that you give us a tag on Spotify, on YouTube, and try to follow us and try to follow the surgeons and doctors and ocular specialists like Dr. Natasha Pahuja
Thank you.
from Pune. So thank you so much, and hope to see you next time.
See you next time.